center. Okay. We are in like quite recently created center that coordinates more or less all the activities that the university is putting in place around the initiative of planetary well-being. We have a newsletter, we organize monthly seminar, we have various activities. You're all welcome to visit the webpage of the center. If you just Google Center for Study Planetary Wellbeing UPF, you will get it, and you can sign up for the newsletter and receive all the news and the activity, the information on the activity that we are doing with the center. So this month, this trimester, let's say, our seminars are dedicated to arts and humanities in general. So we started last month with the inauguration of a art exhibition from Martin Bonadeo, who is still that is still going on in Campus Poblenou. So if you go by Campus Poblenou Art Ateliers, you can see the art exhibition. And today we have the pleasure of having here Isabel Valverde and Santiago Zabala of the Department of Humanities, which is incidentally my department as well. So I'm really happy to have them both here. I'm going to present them very quickly because most of you probably know them already. So Isabel is graduated in art history from the University of Barcelona, and she had the Master of Art in the University of New York, La City. She's also, she has a PhD in art history from the Free University of Berlin. Yeah. And I mean, she has directed different exhibitions and she teaches in the department, so she's very active. And she's also very active, as you will see in the presentation today, on themes that are related to climate change and how we can use art to expand our awareness or the collective awareness on this emergency. And Santiago Zabala is an ICREA research professor. He's a philosopher, and I would like to present him by citing his citation from his ICREA website, where it says that the greatest emergency of the 21st century has become the absence of emergency. So finally, maybe he's found an emergency that he can work on. And again, he will talk about it today. He had a very moved history. He moved from Rome, Vienna, Geneva. He studied in Turin and in Rome and, fellowship in Germany. So he moved around quite a lot. And he's, as I was saying, a philosopher, also very active in like the general press. He has written for La Vanguardia, for the New York Times, for Al Jazeera, etc., written many books. I invite you to check them out, although he was saying me that he normally doesn't recommend his own books, but I disregard what he says and just check them out. Okay, so I don't want to take up more time because you're not here to listen to me, but to listen to her. So I will give the word to Isabel first. Okay, you're going to sit. Perfect. And I can give you the microphone. You can pin it if you want. Or... Yeah.
Is that okay? Is that okay?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see if people from home they complain.
Then we can change. So thanks very much for being here, and we are. Santiago and I really arrived very, very quickly. I thought I couldn't make it, but finally I can. So I'm really happy to share with you these debates, which I hope will be a debate. Just to make it short, I will make a short make it short to give more time for your questions and the debate, obviously. I'll just tell you how these 2 days of presentations, debates among artists, philosophers, art historians began, how they took place, who was involved in this. We organized this conference like 2 years ago. there are many, we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but just a few things to tell you. First, we thought it as a cross-disciplinary initiative, and a cross-disciplinary initiative within Planetary, the initiative of planetary well-being, because for us it is clear, at least in our minds and hearts, it's clear that planetary well-being is not only a matter of, let's say, the techno-scientific realm, but involves and must involve the symbolic realm, which is obviously that of literature, video, art, performances, painting, photography, installations, any sort of aesthetic and artistic practices. So, and that we have a shared goal of caring about the planet, which is caring about society, which is also caring about ourselves and those who come after us. So cross-disciplinarity. Second, I think it's important to look a bit at the title. The title is Understanding Our Climate Emergency, about emergency that's Santiago's cup of tea. So he will be talking about that, but just I want to point out to a couple of things. Understanding. What do we mean by understand, and what are we supposed to understand about by which means do we understand or can understanding? We recognize that there is not only an intellectual dimension in the word understanding, but as in French, which is comprendre, that is taking with us, no? So it is not only an act of the intellect, but also an act that opens the possibility of other ways to grasp and to tackle the issue of our climate emergency, and that those ways can be emotions, feelings, affects, etc. That not only take into account our souls, so to say, but our bodies as well. Because in a way, it's an issue that crosses our bodies. And we use the word our, not the, which is different, and signaling by that it is a matter of us all, a concern and a responsibility to not only to study, to analyze, but also to interpret, and above all, to learn how to care. And the issue of caring is as pregnant in many artistic practices and in many epistemological and aesthetic reflections. As I say, emergency, I won't be talking about that because I would be, it's not my, I'm not good enough at that, and he will have many other things to say about it. The thing began with these, the second, next one. That is our presentation. You can find everything online. The conferences, the two-day conference is all edited and it's on this webpage. And the next all began like that. That is a review of the 2019 Art Basel Miami in The Guardian. You can see The Guardian, the front page or the first page of The Guardian. And I was very struck by this front page, because if you see, they say, that's the title of the article. See, the idea is that art can help how Art Basel Miami tackled the climate crisis. This report from the art fair, which opened stating that art can help in tackling the climate crisis, and with this piece, which is blocks of ice in front of the swimming pool of a hotel where most of the clients of the Art Basel Miami, which is the most important, Art Basel is the most important art fair, contemporary art fair in the world. So it's a lot of money going on there, a lot of buyers, collectors, galleries, dealers, etc., going there. And then let these blocks of ice melt during the 2 weeks of the fair was very interesting. And also because this idea of art can help comes from the statement of an artist, Vanessa Albury, who said that the idea is art can help, it can bring relief. This idea of bringing relief was very interesting. And also what she was saying later on is that art can help in a manner that science cannot. And then we, Santiago and I, thought that why didn't we develop that into a conference, being interdisciplinary as we are and complementary in a way, you know. Art historians are sometimes very close to, sometimes, not always, to philosophers, and philosophers sometimes to art historians. But in any case, we get on well, I think we can say that, right? We are friends, exactly, we are friends. And so we organized this 2 days conference with artists because we thought it was absolutely impossible to do something without artists, without the practitioners. And we had Amanda Bötzkes, who is an artist who has these books and talked about this performance done at the in the glaciers of in the ice sheet of Greenland. And then we had Diane Berko, this painter who has been doing these things and who is traveling all the time. And many of the times she has been traveling, she travels and makes expeditions with scientists. She has been everywhere in the coral reef. Now she has been in the rainforest, and she has done one of these late paintings by her which are huge. And she was also one of the other persons invited to talk. And Santiago, and then came Andrea Andreco, who was also talking about his many of his projects, and that is one project in the Venice Biennale of the sea level, how the sea level has been higher and higher, or can be higher and high, and lead to this technical disappearance or danger of the lacuna, and then that's a bit what it was. All those things will be, all those materials and debates are being developed and elaborated into a book, which will come out in the Altamarea Publishing Company. And our work has been going on. We had a session, and I thought we forgot to put, we had a session during the Winter School on Planetary Wellbeing, which was held in 2021, if I'm not 21 or 22, I don't remember, or 20. I mean, after the pandemics, my idea of time has changed so much, I get lost. But we had a session at the Makaba with the presence of, again, an artist, and Santiago, myself, and above all, one of the most important and, if controversial as well, theoreticians in UCLA, UC San Diego, who is TJ Demos, who was participating online in this. And that was a part of the winter school on planetary well-being. Personally, before leaving the floor to Santiago, I think that there is much more room to collaborate in the project. I think that the artists, theoreticians, thinkers, poets, whatever, movie makers have a lot to say of that. It is almost a cliche to hear the coupling of art and Anthropocene, art and climate crisis, but it is an issue. This is very important, and I think scientists and artists or thinkers can bring much to each other, very, very much. Creativity, imagination, emotions, rigor, etc. So that's, I don't know if you are all scientists. I think that there are two here that are not really, I mean, not hard science people, but we will be, I would love to be really more in touch with you for these matters. Santiago, emergency. No, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not comfortable here. Can you sit? Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to change my computer. No quiero mi computadora. Okay, so okay, so so Isabel has already basically said everything. I don't really have to say anything else. I know it was a joke, actually. I really don't have to say much. The important things have been said by her. Philosophers don't say anything serious. It's not useful at all. And the fact that it's not useful is very important because the reason we are in this climate emergency is because we only think through science, right? We only think in terms of utility, basically. So all my research and the reason I work on this and some publications I've done, it really has a lot to do with this idea that we think that science or scientism or any sort of or technology in general is first something good. It's always good. When normally new phones don't work and a young doctor, you shouldn't really listen to him. Better to get someone more experienced. So one problem is the fact that everything that is new works fine. And science in some way has given us this illusion that, well, the more science we have, the better. The more technological advanced, I don't know, technologies or whatever, the better. And this has created a situation in which, well, if we find ourselves in this climate emergency, it is not because of artists. It's not the fault of artists or philosophers, even less. I mean, nobody listens to us. But it is the fault of science, okay? Because they are the ones who are supposed to solve this. So when at the European Union, for example, they say, you know what, well, let's get a really cool economist who is going to solve all our economic problems, nothing happens. Because most problems we have, at least those existential problems that really touch the functioning work of a society, well, these problems cannot be solved through science. They actually cannot be solved at all, but certainly not only by science. So there's a very politically moderate philosopher, no, he was an asshole, Martin Heidegger, but he's very important because Martin Heidegger explained very clearly that science doesn't think. It doesn't. It calculates. It calculates very, very well as long as it stays within its paradigm or linguistic game or whatever you want to call it. But it doesn't really think. In other words, it cannot manage to overcome that same problem that it tries to, in some way, solve. So we find ourselves now, at least we find ourselves for a while now, in this idea that, well, scientists, at least the good scientists, if there are any scientists here, I'm referring to you as well, well, it's not really so much about findings anymore. Even at the big geological conferences, and Naomi Klein explains this properly in one of her last books, it's not a question of explaining once again that the ice is melting. That's not or we're going to have another really hot summer like the one we have. It's not a question of findings anymore. We have all the findings. That's not the issue anymore, right? So the problem is not anymore a question of whether we're going to actually manage to explain to you even better the things. You can explain it as well as you like. We're still not going to get it. And by us, I mean society in general, the structure of society in general, politics and everything. So it's a very complex issue that requires a change in some way of, well, a change of paradigm, a change of, but also an idea of trying to understand some way to how can we describe the society in which we find ourselves, or let's call it the intellectual general situation in which we are. How can we explain what is the spiritual predicament in which we are now? Because philosophers, the good ones, of course, no, I'm joking, but philosophers in general, they try to give a broad view, a global view of what's going on. That's why it's useless, because whether we have that or not, it doesn't really change from a pragmatical point of view. But it can help to see the big problems we have. And so in philosophy, what is important is the question, not the answer. The answer is for you guys to find. But for us, the question is the issue. And what is the question nowadays? Well, one of the questions we have nowadays, which is very important, is why don't we listen to warnings? Newspapers are full of warnings the whole time. And not only newspapers. My wife says, we drink so much. She's right, I shouldn't drink so much. I don't smoke, so she don't say that. But the drinking is a problem. It's not a problem. But we don't really listen to warnings, right? We don't listen to warnings that your family tells you unless someone gets cancer. And there, something changes, right? Normally, if the doctor tells you, if you keep on drinking or smoking, you get cancer, you go on. But when your brother gets cancer, that's when it touches you, right? So and it's the same sort of knowledge we have, right? Same sort of knowledge we have. Therefore, the issue here is that knowledge or understanding, like Isabel just explained, it's really not a matter of rationality. It's not a question of understanding better. We can understand very, very well all the scientific findings we have, but that's not enough to change the something. So I'm sure that most of you are thinking, but Santiago forgot what Marx said. Marx said, philosophers only interpret the world, the point is to change it. Well, Heidegger, Zizek, and Bruno Latour, and many others have explained to Marx what he said now, but in some way we explain it to him that, no, actually the problem is the other way around now. We have changed the world too much this past century. The point now is to step back and think from a global point of view, right? Maybe from global studies, so I can tell the degree we have here. But we have to change, in other words, the way it's not a question anymore of describing, it's not a question anymore of changing, it's a question of thinking, right? Stepping back and thinking. So what is the spiritual predicament in which we are now? How can we describe it? Now, this idea of emergence. There's the whole theory of the state of perception. Maybe you've heard of Carl Schmitt, Agamben, and all these people, and we had a smaller state of perception here during the pandemic. And esto. Yeah, as soon as I started talking about emergency, you tell me. Yeah. Hello, emergency. You hear me? Complain. We don't have enough complaints. So what is the spiritual predicament today? How can we describe the situation in which we are now? Following Heidegger, Agamben, and many other serious philosophers, I came up in my last books with this idea that, well, the greatest emergency we have, not the only, be careful, everybody confuses. I said the greatest, not the only, the greatest emergency we have is the absence of emergency. In other words, nothing really happens anymore. Now, Gaza, Ukraine, of course, things happen. Obviously, they happen. The pandemic, 9/11, economic crisis, 2008, 2009, whoa, big events. Well, the problem is that these events don't really change anything. If you look carefully at them, they sort of intensify even further the condition in which we were before. 9/11, more wars in the Middle East. 2008, 2009 financial crisis, even more, less regulations and more liberalism. Pandemic, we're definitely going to have another one, and basically the pandemic basically helped in order to maintain the same things the things I just mentioned before. And the problem also here is a question of warnings, even there, because pandemic we were warned at least 20 years that we were going to have a coronavirus 11, 12, 13, whatever it was. And we didn't listen at all. And this didn't come from philosophers. This came from the World Health Organization. So you can, so this is, it's not, how come we don't listen to those warnings, which are, and even 9/11 was warned, even Condoleezza Rice, I'm old, maybe you don't remember, but Condoleezza Rice was the secretary, etc., and she warned once a commission that, oh yeah, maybe planes will fly over New York. And so we are, this century is a century in which the level of technological advancement and control, etc., has reached such a level that, well, there are warnings which are not predictions, which is different. A warning is something different from a prediction, which we could be listening to them a little bit more careful. And the problem is that we are not. Now, let's talk about simple warnings like, for example, climate change, which is very simple. I mean, there are findings, it's pretty clear. There are many years of research on that, but we don't listen. And by we, I'm referring to very big governments, very big states, very big organizations besides us. Probably we listen to it, but we're in the university and look how many we are here. So even this issue is not really discussed by at a level of change. Nothing really changes there. Okay. So why doesn't anything change there? So is it the fault of a few artists that managed to, for example, this artist from Sweden, which there are two artists whose names are very difficult to pronounce. They're online. I'm sorry, but anyway, what they do is they make these works of art with this beam light around this buildings around, which is basically the level of the water that we'll reach in 2030, I think, or something like that. Well, is this going to work more than a nice scientific conference with Stanley Hansen or a greatest scientific researcher explaining to us how we are screwed? Actually, yes, this would work better because, I mean, you all know the greatest, all the big scientists who work on climate change. But if I walk out in the street and I ask someone, you know who Stanley Hansen is, he would say, I have no idea. But if I say Greta Thunberg, she will know who it is. Now, whether Greta Thunberg has a huge spin doctor working for her, I doubt it. This is something that sort of works on its own. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that truth, knowledge, in a different context, understanding, has more to do with feelings, right? It has more to do with feelings and most of all with relationships also. So when Heidegger says science doesn't think or science is not enough, well, it's definitely not enough. I mean, at all, because even at a more private level, you start to worry about alcohol when someone gets sick, who you know, not that people get sick, right? So how come we only change when these things touch us in a more personal, in a more sensible way, or touch more our sensibility? So the idea that, well, our greatest emergency is the absence of emergency really refers to, for example, the pandemic, the coronavirus in general, used to be an absent emergency. In other words, an emergency that it is there, we're being warned by it, but we're not going to treat it as an emergency. Then it finally takes place, it becomes an emergency, right? And at that point, of course, it's either too late or whatever. So the problem is that our greatest emergencies today are the ones we're not really working on. For example, the simple issue of air pollution. 7 million people die per year in Europe only of air pollution. Well, maybe we should be treating that with the same way we treated the pandemic, the coronavirus. It seems to me. And we have all these findings, but why isn't this different there? Well, because we have a serious problem in understanding warnings. In other words, we are warned the whole time about all these things that happen. And if you open any newspaper today, you will see warnings by scientists, warnings by, so we don't really listen to it. So how can we begin to listen to warnings? How can we begin to listen to, for example, another absent emergency that nobody talks to is the digital divide, or a nice blackout we could have on half of the internet that would kill many more people than, which is something that it would probably happen. I mean, you should save everything on hard drives on the side or print stuff, because it will happen. It's not so strange that it won't. So all these things are, how do we confront absent emergencies? How do we get close to that? Well, one, not through science. This is the first thing we have to take into consideration, because now, of course, we're going to find some scientists working on air pollution, and it's wonderful the work they do and everything. But is that enough? Well, it hasn't been. Until now, it is clear that it hasn't been. It's not enough. Okay? So at this, so we need some sort of change, right? Which is something that I'm not requesting. I mean, Naomi Klein and many other, Bruno Latour, has been working on this for ages. So the issue here is, how do we manage to get closer to, how can we understand this absence emergency? Well, one way to understand them is, for example, through art, okay? Through art that can, for example, have you seen, this is the good part of my talk today. Have you seen Don't Look Up? Ah, you saw it, huh? You see the point. Well, it's Netflix, so it is what it is. But still, you know, it's coming, and nobody could care less. But it's actually coming. No way we get it. Well, the coronavirus was basically the same thing, okay? It went on Netflix after, but still. So that's a good example of the situation in which we are. We are unable to interpret, right, this warnings that we have, which the science gives us these warnings until a certain extent, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And the solutions we have are also not enough. Now, can art save us? Well, it depends what we understand by the word saving, by salvation. Okay, if any philosophers work on many disciplines. So if you do a nice work on the term salvation, you would see that salvation doesn't really mean, it's not really about rescuing someone. Salvation is more about rescuing into something else. In other words, getting closer to the danger, right? So the idea of salvation really has to do when you are close to a danger that would, basically, when you get surgery, they open you up, it's dangerous, but it's still a way to save you, right? It's pretty simple, the situation. So the question here is, how can we understand that salvation doesn't really have to do with rationality or with a particular action we can have? It does have to do with existential responses. In other words, responses which in some way overcome what we understand nowadays by research or even culture in general. So when we talk about, well, something that I like about this program, Planetary Wellbeing, is this idea that, I think it has to involve everybody, right, in the university, every single department. And in the humanities, we can bring something else. No, we probably will be more troublemakers, but we can bring, well, there are not enough troublemakers. So, I mean, and I'm being moderate today, so. But the humanities can bring, don't necessarily have to teach anything in particular, but they can bring a perspective which is not meant to correct science. We could care less about science, but it is meant to point out that, well, not all the solutions we have will come through there. Now, to be clear, there are many philosophers who think that what I am saying is bullshit, and they think that you should be more rational than any other. But that's basically not philosophy. That's something that's called analytic philosophy, and it's not. I think it's taught in this building, but not here. That doesn't really have anything to do with philosophy. But anyway, for example, one of the most important representative of analytic philosophy is John Searle. John Searle, really important. He was honored by George W. Bush for his amazing research, right, in 2003, after the invasion of Iraq. So the corporation, the collaboration and cooperation of analytic philosophy with power, it's evident. So they can't really help us here. But philosophers working on teams that deal with problems that emerge from society and can also be solved within society are the ones that can at least help us find global answers, or perhaps better questions than the ones we still have now. One more thing, and then I stop because I'm tired already. So, because I'm hungry also, because this 1 to 2 is predictions and warnings. What is the difference? Because too often we exchange them and we confuse one with the other. Prediction is, I will now hold this bottle. And I did keep my promise. Now, a warning is something different, right? Prediction has to do with the future, which is absolutely useless. The future is useless. I will go home after this. Well, no big deal. I mean, the warnings have to do are different. Warnings are not, cannot, and often are not scientific findings. Otherwise, I mean, in scientific findings, you should more be talking about prediction. This is will happen in the next 10 years. Well, more or less that's true. But warnings are more interesting because they're not funded upon the idea of the future, but rather funded upon the idea of l'avenir, what is coming. Okay? And what is the difference between what is coming, l'avenir, and the future? It's a very big difference. L'avenir is something that you have to be like falling in love. Do you know when it will happen? No. Regardless what Bumble says, you do not know when it will happen. Okay? You will, well, it happens. Right now that I have to study for an exam. You know, you don't know when it will happen, right? You have to be open to listen to what will happen, right? This is the difference between l'avenir. Now, all this is Jacques Derrida, okay? A very important philosopher. So the idea that we should be thinking more in terms of l'avenir, what is coming to us, it's also the way of how we can listen to those absence emergencies that we don't see or that we don't understand now. And so the idea of projecting a politics, a general politics, and by politics, I don't necessarily refer to Le Pen or Netanyahu. I basically just more general idea of politics as the horizon where society should be moving in some way. It is one that listens to warnings, listens to that avenue that will probably take place. The difference between the future and l'avenir is also that in the future, you have no choice. The doctor says, tomorrow you're screwed. But instead, l'avenir is different. L'avenir means that, well, if you keep on going this way, probably you're screwed after tomorrow. So you have something you can do, right? L'avenir allows you a space of productions, of manipulations, of change, basically. So warnings normally are basically a way of telling you that there is an alternative. Right? Now, I prefer to think in terms of an alteration rather than an alternative, and the difference, the ontological difference between the two is extremely boring, and I won't bore you anymore. Okay.